The Legend of Heroes games represent a series that I've only recently discovered. I hadn't even heard of them until sometime last year, which was 2021. I don't even remember how I stumbled across the games, but after looking into them, I picked up the first Trails of Cold Steel. I've yet to finish it, but I do absolutely love it so far, and that's led me to pick up Trails of Cold Steel 2 and 3 with 4 to follow shortly. My plan was to play through all 4 of the Cold Steel games in my spare time, but when you review games even at my level, you do end up with very little time for long games like those. Still though, I've enjoyed what I've played so far, and I live in hope that I will be able to finish them all one day. My enjoyment of the first game is what prompted me to review the game that we're talking about today, Trails from Zero. It is very old school, which you can probably tell, but there is a good reason for that, which we'll get into in a moment. I have thoroughly enjoyed this game, and for me, it oozes retro charm from every single pixel. I found the characters to be instantly likable, and I was eager to find out where the story was going. I think it would be almost impossible not to recommend this to any JRPG fan. I mean, sure, not everyone is going to like it, but I believe that the vast majority absolutely will. So what is The Legend of Heroes Trails from Cold Steel? Well, it's actually a remaster of a JRPG which released on the PSP in 2010. It was originally only released in Japan under the name Zero no Keiseki, and it's a small part of the wider Legend of Heroes series. This game and its sequel, which is called Trails to Azure, form a duology known as the Crossbell arc. Speaking of which, a remaster of that sequel is due to release in February 2023, and with any luck, I'll be reviewing that one as well. Story-wise, the game takes place before the events of the Cold Steel games, but occurs within the same world and focuses on a different group of characters. The main protagonist of the game is Lloyd Bannings, an entry-level detective who ends up being assigned to the SSS, the Special Support Section of the local police department. After the intro and some world-building scenes, you'll meet up with the other 3 members of your group, Ellie McDowell, Tio Plato, and Randy Orlando. Lloyd is very quickly put in charge of the group due to being the only one of them to have official police training and qualifications. After taking some time to think things over, the group reluctantly accepts their positions within the SSS and begins to help the people of Crossbell with odd jobs and any issues that they might have. Needless to say, there are a huge amount of narrative threads that I'm purposefully avoiding. The Trails games are well known for their detailed stories, and I really don't want to spoil anything, so I'll leave the rest for you to discover on your own. It is worth noting that you can choose from 4 difficulty settings in order to tailor the experience to your tastes. If you want to simply enjoy the story and get through the game, then the easy setting is going to be for you. But if you want to enjoy the story and be challenged in combat at the same time, then perhaps normal or hard mode would suit you better. After some time has passed, you'll gain access to most of the city-state of Crossbell, which includes many districts to explore, shops to browse, and people to talk to. You'll often have a variety of requests to undertake and complete, which of course brings in money and rewards for your team. These requests are accepted and reported at the computer terminal, which is located within the police station. You might be surprised to learn that a lot of the game proceeds forward without engaging in combat. This isn't a full-on, constant, action-packed RPG, at least not all of the time. There's a lot of slow but very detailed story sections where the characters talk amongst themselves or to other NPCs to solve problems. That's not to say that combat doesn't exist, it definitely does, and I can tell you that it ramps up in frequency as the story progresses. That said, you should definitely expect to have a lot of quiet moments which help build the world around you and allow you to get to know the characters. This game features turn-based tactical combat, although it isn't as in-depth or tactical as something like Triangle Strategy, for example. As you might expect, defeating enemies in battle rewards your party with XP, items, and Sepith. Sepith are small coloured crystals of various elements which can be refined into a stone known as quartz. The red crystals can be refined into a type of quartz that contains the fire element, for example. During the prologue, each member of the team is given an orbment which has a number of useful functions. Its primary use, however, is to hold different types of quartz and harness their power. Each character's orbment device starts off with only 1 slot, but you do have the ability to unlock more over time by spending Sepith. Slotting quartz of different types into a character's orbment grants that character access to elemental abilities of that type. So slotting a red quartz into the orbment will allow that character to use fire arts, and slotting a yellow quartz will allow the user to cast earth arts. And while we're on the subject, arts is what this game and other games in the series call the spells and abilities that you cast. During battle, unlike a standard attack command, arts take a turn to cast due to being relatively potent. Arts use a resource called EP, which is basically the same as MP from other RPGs. Other than standard attacks and arts, you also have the ability to use crafts. Crafts are skills that are unique to a specific character. They usually deal good damage, but they can also contain a wide range of effects. Later on in the game, you'll unlock the ability to use combo crafts, which are special attacks that require 2 different characters to execute. In order to use a craft, you'll need to build up CP or craft points, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. CP is awarded to a character for hitting enemies, getting hit themselves, and through other effects. Once a character has 100 or more CP stored up, they can actually interrupt the turn flow and unleash a powerful S-break attack. As soon as a character hits 100 CP, you can press triangle on the PS4 version and then use the D-pad to select the attack. As I mentioned earlier, this game is technically a turn-based strategy RPG, but it's a bit more freeform in its implementation. You can move on the battlefield via a grid system, but you won't need to walk up to the character and then select the attack button like in most games of this type. Each attack has a certain range tied to it, even the close melee ones, and it is rather generous. If you select a standard melee attack and the enemies are in range, your character will automatically walk to the enemy and hit them for you. Being behind an enemy or to their flank doesn't really matter as far as I'm aware. That is except for when you're walking around the dungeon and you're outside of a battle. Battles aren't random, you actually need to walk into an enemy within the dungeon to engage with them, which allows you to avoid them if you want to. If an enemy walks into the back of you, they start the battle with the advantage, and likewise if you do the same to them, you'll start with the advantage. If you just walk into an enemy from the front, no one has the advantage, but if you hit the enemy from behind to stun them and then walk into them, you'll have gained maximum advantage. This is a very beneficial state, allowing you to strike first, and it's also pretty easy to pull off consistently. In my experience, starting a battle with max advantage can often lead to a team rush attack, which does hit pretty hard indeed. Lastly, it's worth mentioning that you can of course buy various consumable items and equipment for your party members. Each character favours a specific weapon type. Lloyd uses tonfas, Ellie uses a pistol, Tio uses an orbal staff, and Randy uses a halberd. You can purchase improved versions of these weapons at the in-game stores, as well as clothes and accessories which will augment each character's stats. The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero releases on the 30th of September 2022 for PS4, Nintendo Switch and PC. It will obviously be playable on PS5 as well, but there is no dedicated PS5 version. A physical copy will be available for Nintendo Switch and PS4, and these physical copies will always be a deluxe edition as standard. It will include a small full-color art book, a digital download for the soundtrack, and a reversible cover which was voted on by the fans. If you really want to go all in, you could grab the limited edition from the NIS America website, but as of the recording of this video, it's very close to being sold out. So what did I think of the game? Well, despite the fact that it's a bit old school in many ways, even when compared to the Cold Steel games, I really enjoyed my time with it. This game, at least to me, shows the difference between a well-told story with great world building and your run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter RPG. I think some younger players out there who aren't really into all the retro stuff might struggle to give this game the time of day. Even though it's had some HD upscaling and been cleaned up quite a bit, it still does look quite old, and I believe that some people will dismiss it on that fact alone. Now personally, I love how it looks. I don't really know exactly why, but I tend to like it when the developers keep it looking retro with all the low-res textures and everything, but then allow it to display in HD. The edges of most of the geometry are nice and sharp, but the textures on the geometry are quite low-res. I don't know what it is about that look, but I'm definitely here for it. I guess it's because I played a lot of games that looked like this back in the day, but you know, that was on an old CRT television, so it feels nostalgic to see a game of this style presented in HD with all of its old world charm still intact. That said, there is something that I feel that everybody should know, and honestly, I do feel a little bit cheated by it. So, the original 2010 PSP version of the game ended up getting an improved port which was released on the PS Vita 2 years later in 2012. That improved version is what the PS4 version that I'm playing here is based on. All well and good so far, but this is where it takes a kind of crappy turn. The Nintendo Switch and PC versions of this very game are getting extra visual upgrades and some quality of life features that simply do not exist in the PS4 version that I'm reviewing. So, I'm sad to say that anyone who buys the PS4 version will be paying the same price for a technically inferior product. Now, I'm going to try to show you a couple of comparison shots here so that you can see it for yourself. I'm not overly bothered by how it looks because, as I said at the beginning, I like the old school charm. But when you start thinking about it from a customer's point of view, I think it's actually pretty ridiculous. The PS4 version is at best a port of the Vita version, and as far as I can see, it's not advertised to the customer in any way. I have to wonder how many people will buy the PS4 version and have no idea what they're getting. It just feels so, I don't know, unfair, especially to gamers who don't follow these things as closely as I do. To be honest, now that I've been given the PS4 version to review and seen the differences in the other versions, I may just go and buy the Switch version for myself so that I can enjoy the upgrades. Long story short, I like how it looks. I think it's got a lot of charm to it even though it's the inferior version. However, some Legend of Heroes purists may argue that the PS4 is actually the most faithful of the 3 versions to the original, so I guess it could depend on how you look at it. In terms of the story, there were definitely some quiet parts and sections which almost felt like a visual novel, but even so, it really did pull me in. I cared about the people, I cared about what was happening, and the way the world is built around you through the dialogue and visual cues really helped to keep me engaged. I can't promise that you, the person watching this video, will like it as much as I did, but I thought it was very well done and the writing felt really natural. It's probably worth mentioning that there is no English dub and the game features Japanese voices with English subtitles only. I've said it before, but I usually prefer English dubs when they're available. That said, I don't actually have a problem with Japanese voice acting at all. It's always great in my opinion. I just go for the English dubs for convenience and ease of listening. Still though, as far as the story goes, I thought it was pretty great and I'm looking forward to seeing where the sequel goes in February 2023. Gameplay and combat wise, as someone who isn't super into tactical RPGs as much as turn-based ones, I appreciated the fact that the combat was moderately complex, but it felt really easy to understand. It's very straightforward and very easy to learn. I pretty much understood the entire game after the first combat tutorial, so thumbs up from me on that one. To play devil's advocate though, I suppose it could be considered a little bit basic by players that are used to a lot of intricate RPG systems. For me, it works great and I was happy to be able to get into the game and just play it, you know, rather than being bogged down in 1,000 different mechanics and not being able to fully grasp what I was doing. All in all, I had a very good time with it, controversy aside. It bugs me that all 3 versions aren't the same thing, and it doesn't really sit right with me that they kinda hid it from us. That said, the game is still worth playing even without the visual bonuses. If PS4 is your only option, then I don't really know what to say. I'm tempted to say that you shouldn't buy it as a sort of vote with your wallet kind of thing, but in reality, only you can decide if you're willing to part with your money for it. If you do have the option of PS4, Switch and/or PC, then maybe it would be best to avoid the PS4 version. In my opinion, The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero is a great game that's taken far too long to appear on Western shores. It's been 12 years since the initial release and I suppose it's better late than never. Ignoring the PS4 version issues, I think it looks appropriate for a PSP remaster. It's got a lot of old school JRPG charm and its gameplay systems could be mastered by literally anybody. That alone leads me to believe that this is a very accessible game that could very well create new fans of the series. Ultimately, and I hate to say this, I think that the PS4 version is real close to being a deal breaker, and it most likely will be for some die-hard Trails fans. As far as my feelings go, it wasn't quite to that level, but it definitely doesn't sit well with me. Still though, it's a great game despite all that, and if you've been enjoying the Cold Steel series, I would absolutely recommend picking this one up. If you've never played any Legend of Heroes games before, I'd probably recommend that you try Trails of Cold Steel first, but make no mistake, Trails from Zero is definitely worth your time. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.